Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and to get the little legal disclaimers out of the way first, due to the laws in the country in which I live, the views expressed in this video by yours truly are my honestly held opinion, and they fall under the area of academic debate. So, a lot of you saw yesterday online on the interwebs, Quest put up a video by an individual named Jonathan Bailor, who promotes himself as a science-based guru in regards to nutritional science and nutrition and weight loss. And there was a very negative response, first by my bro Alan Aragon, who is a world-renowned nutritionist and sports nutritionist, and personal friend of mine who was kind enough to send me a copy of the video because I'd only seen it once before Quest pulled it. So thank you, Alan. And I know you and I are both big fans of the white rice. Along with people like Brandon Campbell, Maddie Fusar, other people just came on there and slammed the video. I did too, and that caused a lot of my subscribers to want me to make a response video. Now, Quest had enough wisdom due to the public outcry, particularly by some of their sponsored people, such as Maddie Fusaro, to pull this video, and I think that was a very wise move on their part. But I'm not going to fail to address the video because people really wanted my take on this, and I did go watch yesterday whilst doing my morning cardio. I watched an hour-long lecture by this individual to see what else he was all about. But we're not going to get into all that. We're going to get into this short little clip he did. And even Aries wants in on some of the action here. As you guys can see, Aries is still bulking up, and he's on a zero-carb diet, and he is bulking up fast. He's getting fat on all this ketogenic diet there. And he titled the video, "A Calorie Isn't a Calorie," which whenever you see that, you know that is the public outcry of a low-carb guru. And it's ironic because while they are technically true that all calories are not equal, they always get it wrong in terms of the science. They actually get the calories mixed up as to which ones processed certain ways. And it's very ironic that you know it's going to be a low-carb guru or an anti-carbophobe. So the points he raised in this video that I think need to be addressed briefly, I took some notes here. And point number one, he says that it's been proven wrong that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. Well, he's right, because they all have different thermic effects. And in order of thermic effect, it goes protein has the highest thermic effect. So when it comes to net calories, protein calories have the least. Then it goes carbohydrates and then fat, because fats have nearly zero thermic effect, while carbs tend to be between the two. So fat calories are the most efficient at utilization and storage. So he's technically wrong, but he's not right in the sense of when he says that quality of calories, unless he means in that order. Because the micronutrient content and the nutritional value of calories, as he's tried to claim in this video, have no impact on how fattening they are per calorie or how your body utilizes them for energy. Now that will matter for overall health, no one's disputing that. I don't advocate eating very much processed food or even processed sugars, other than for extreme athletes who need it for ultra high energy needs, who have ultra high energy turnover. The next point was he brought up an example of a cake versus chicken breast, and he pointed out with the same calories that the chicken breast would produce less insulin than the cake. And he pointed out, and he said, and I quote, that 25 grams of protein has less of an insulin response than 10 grams of sugar. To which I had responded in the comments, "Do you even science, bro?" Let's look at that for a minute. First of all, this is undisputed science. We know that protein per gram generally produces a higher insulin response than carbohydrates do, including sugars. And we're not talking about necessarily spikes, because the spikes are almost irrelevant unless you're fasted, because the food you've eaten previously that day blunts the spikes, fiber, fat, everything else that you've eaten blunts the insulin spikes later in the day. So we're talking about net insulinogenic effect, but even fast absorbing proteins can produce a massive spike. So gram for gram, protein generally produces a larger response despite it not producing as much blood sugar. And I'll get into that in just a minute. So we already know that if they were equal, the protein would be producing more insulin than the carbs. But in this case, it is 2.5 times as many grams. So I think it's fair to say that the total insulin produced in the same individual by those two foods you compared, the one that you said is lower insulin is probably at least 3 times as much insulin. So I've got to question if this person really understands insulin response in the body. And secondly, sugars are not all created equal in terms of insulin response. Carbs actually vary a lot. And in fact, fructose, probably in that sugar, because that cake is probably, the sugars in that cake are probably mostly table sugar, which is 50% fructose by weight. Now glucose would be the other 50%, which produces a lot of insulin, but fructose does not have an insulin response. It might have a blood sugar response in the grand scheme of things, and it does. It has a GI when fasted of around 20, but it doesn't produce an insulinogenic response. So our insulin goes even lower there. So you're way off. Next, this guy says that too much sugar in the bloodstream is toxic, and that's why we need to produce insulin to regulate it. He's right, but this is only in the case of diabetics. Normal people don't have issues with this. Our body regulates this, and it goes back to the other point of if you're worried about blood sugar, why would you be telling people to eat protein? Because what happens with that chicken breast, it produces more insulin than the carbs do. Well, your body, just like your body has to produce insulin, just like the guy said in the video, to lower blood sugar. Well, if there's not blood sugar being produced by the protein, and there's an insulin response, your blood sugar will drop hypoglycemic. That's also dangerous. So what does your body do in response to the insulin that's now been kicked out? You have glucocorticoids and other things that respond in the body, and it causes your liver to release stored glycogen as glucose. So the blood sugar effect down the road from the protein is actually quite high. So if you're concerned about blood sugar at all, why are you recommending eating this protein? If you're concerned about the toxicity of sugar in the blood, it's going to release even more sugar over the grand scheme of things because of the glycogen stores in the liver, and then in turn any excess protein that you do not burn for fuel, that you do not use for structural materials, and gets converted back into glucose, converted into glycogen by the liver, and stored there to replace what was lost later. The next thing the guy said is insulin stores sugar as fat. This is provably false. This is true in rats. In humans, de novo lipogenesis, which is the creation of body fat or triglycerides or any sort of fatty acids from blood sugar, is very, very rare. It happens at very, very low rates, so you can overfeed large amounts of carbohydrates to someone. Let's say you give a bunch of women an extra 500 calories of white rice in one sitting. When they're already at maintenance calories, they'll produce several grams of fat from it, but it's a very, very small amount. In fact, we'll get to that point on his next topic, because the guy talked about the efficiency of how different types of macronutrients are stored as body fat. Well, I think this guy doesn't understand this, because in order of greatest to least, he has it wrong. Sugar doesn't get stored easily or effectively that way. Dietary fat is what gives every person walking around right now on this earth at least 95, if not 100% of their fat stores in their body came from fat that they ate. And I'm not telling you not to eat fat with that, but that is the overwhelming majority of it. We can store dietary fat extremely efficiently, even without the presence of insulin. And in fact, this is so pronounced that when you take a biopsy of someone's fat ass or their fat gut, guess what happens? You can tell what sort of fat they ate. You can tell what their dietary preferences are, because it will match the fat that they eat in their diet and the different percentages, the ratios of different types of essential fatty acids to monounsaturated fats, to the different types of saturated fat. You can actually get an idea of what their diet composition looks like from their fat biopsies, because they store the fat that they eat directly. Anytime they eat excess calories, the fat that they ate gets stored. So fat is way at the top of that list, even though he's very, very pro-fat. I notice he wants people to be cooking in butter and everything, and promotes higher fat diets in his other lecture, yet he's talking about this efficiency of fat storage. Well, fat is the most efficiently stored, and it will store directly with no energy expended to do so. As a secondary resort, your body can do so with carbohydrates. It happens relatively rarely, and even more rarely in active individuals, and anyone who's wanting to be in shape or lose weight damn well better be active. Yet, if it does manage to do so in the circumstances it does, it expends at least 30% of the calories of the sugar as heat energy just trying to store it. It can't do it efficiently. And then last on the list is protein, because protein is the least likely to be stored, to the point to where a few people out there in the world probably have stored some protein as fat, but a lot of people have never stored any in their life. So in order of efficiency, which is something he was harping on, he got it wrong. It actually is fat way up here, carbs way behind fat, and then protein way behind that, to the point of nearly impossible. So in short, this guy doesn't know nutrition. He doesn't know science. And it is a good thing that Quest pulled this video, because they were getting ripped apart. And again, I only made this video because about a dozen of my subscribers demanded it. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh, I'm going to give you guys a side chest too.